I really miss the 2000s with all my heart and my soul. In my opinion, I think it was the final great decade of pop culture, of history. One of the things I truly miss about the 2000s was going to the arcades, finding arcade machines in the 2000s, in the wild. When I was younger, I went on a lot of vacations. I traveled a lot more when I was younger. And in doing so, I went to a lot of places I wanted to go and didn't want to go. But even in places that were kind of boring, like these buildings and shit when you were younger, in the 2000s, you would still see old arcade machines there, still lying around, and people would still play them in hotels. Back in the 2000s, hotels used to have an arcade room, and it was like in every hotel. Nowadays, they don't have them anymore. And also like sports arenas, hockey rinks and basketball, like football arenas and stuff like that. They would have like 5 or 6 arcade machines there. When you went into sports arenas, they would be there. If you went to Six Flags in the 2000s, they would have a lot of arcade machines, 1 or 2 buildings, a tent and stuff, and you'd go in there and tons of them. That's not around anymore. Nowadays, the old arcade machines from the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, they need a lot more work. They need more preservation. The screens on those old machines, the arcades from the 90s and 2000s, like the screens are dying and they need to be repaired. And most of these machines were not taken care of. I started to notice when they were going away in like the early 2010s, like maybe 2010, 2011, 12, 13, I started seeing them go away when I went to the same places that I went to in the 2000s, like I mentioned, hotels, sports arenas, hockey rinks and stuff. And they used to be there. There used to be like tons of them there, and they needed repairs and they just gave up on them. It's sad. I just feel really lucky that I got to experience this. It was like a homework assignment looking back, because I was born in 1991. So I really didn't get to experience all of the greatest 90s arcade machines to the fullest, but in the 2000s, when I was a teenager, they would still be around. You would see the cruisin' arcade machines in the 2000s. They would still be, you could still play them and everything would be fine. The screens are fine. They look like they have a lot of wear to them. They're still playable, but like vacation spots, hotels, Six Flags, theme parks, carnivals, just stuff like that. You would find them all over the place. I remember going to hotels in the 2000s on vacations with my families. I'd always ask, where's the arcade room? And you go in there and there'd be like this big empty room and there'd be like 3 or 4 machines in there. And one of them would be like Marvel vs. Capcom or Simpsons the Arcade Game or Street Fighter 2 or something. And you'd be like, oh wow, yeah, this is awesome. It was everywhere you went. And then I noticed like when you go to hotels and these places, these sports arenas now, there's none of them. There's none. Like, that era's dead. Like, now if you want to go play classic arcade machines, there are certain places you can still go that still run them. And it's like the retro people now have saved them from death. Those people that repair the old machines, they're most of them are they're retro people, and they care about preserving them. And there's special little places you can go now where you can still play old 80s arcade machines and 90s arcade machines, 2000s ones, and it's still awesome. But they're in small places now. It's smaller. Like now there's maybe, a few places you can go. But back in the 2000s, that was the final decade where these arcade machines didn't need repairs yet. They didn't need a lot of work yet. They were still functional. So people didn't really have to work on them They're like, hey, you got this machine, we need this for the sports arena. All right, yeah, put it in there. Put it with all the 10 other ones. Put them in. And that was it. They didn't have to worry about that shit. But then, 10 years later, and these machines are like 30 or 20 years old. Now they need repairs because they're like ancestors. They're old people, these arcade machines, and they need to be taken care of. And most of these places didn't give a shit about taking care of them. And they left them for dead. They destroyed them. I don't know what the hell else they did with them. They got rid of them, tossed them. They didn't care about repairing them. And that was the final era, the 2000s. That era from 2000, 2009, maybe 2011, 12. It was really like 2000 to 2008 or something. Like, I just remember going to places, and you'd even see like one or two machines at like a supermarket or whatever, and they would just be there, and it was like really cool that they would still have them. And now it's really not like that. In 2024, forget it. Like, there are, like I said, there's special places to find them, but I miss when it was the Wild West out there, when you can go to places that you didn't want to go and you were bored as shit, but there'd be a few arcade machines there you can look at. Even if you didn't have the money to play them, you can still endlessly watch the loop and hear the music and watch the glow of the screen. And just, that's when I fell in love with arcade machines. And it was like a piece of colorful furniture in the room, like an antique that had all this history behind it. And it was really cartoonish. It was like amazing. Finding an artifact from a dead era, when you would find it in the 2000s, and it just seemed like it was there forever. A few people play it every now and then, and I think people took the arcade machines for granted, because now they're not anywhere, except for a few places. But it's sad, because all these companies, all these vacation spots that used to do that kind of stuff, they just didn't give a shit. It was just something that they themselves took for granted. Oh, well, we'll put some arcades in there. That's popular. That's still... I mean, I don't know what killed arcades. I mean, was it just modern games or something? I think it was just laziness, though. It's just like most people didn't give a shit about taking care of them, these businesses and shit, and they're just like, well, just put in some new ones. Put like one or two 2010's arcade machines in there, and you're good. I mean, that's not that's bullshit. Because, I mean, nowadays, if you play a 2010's arcade machine, I mean, it could be still pretty cool, but is it a 2000's arcade machine? Is it a 90's arcade machine? The golden era of arcades. Not just the 80's. Like, the 80's was the beginning of arcades. It was the golden age. Then you had the 90's. And the 90's, you had, like, 3D Gauntlet. You had Hydro Thunder. All the Midway games. That was when Midway dominated the arcades, and a lot of those arcade games, there wasn't enough people that appreciated them. I always loved those arcade machines that the people were like, oh, this game's not very good, like Cruisin' USA. There's a lot of complaints about Cruisin' USA and shit. I mean, those Cruisin' games, Cruisin' 1, Cruisin' World, and Cruisin' Exotica, those were phenomenal. Everyone wanted to play those games. Even all these really young kids I grew up with that never grew up with playing them, they all wanted to play them. I mean, most people, when they saw arcades in the 2000s, they didn't even know that they were old. They just assumed they were from the 2000s. It was only like the retro aficionados that were like, hey, this machine is like 20 years old, man. But most people, they just took them for granted. And it's sad, but that's the thing about life, is that maybe it was somewhat inevitable. That was the last time in history that you could have so many without them getting new screens, without them being repaired. But I think it is more than that, though. It makes me angry that these companies just didn't give a fuck at all. Now retro gaming is even more of a niche thing, because now there's less arcades in places to play, and that was what was amazing about traveling back in the 2000s. You could go to all these random spots, and they would still have a machine there. They would have a Mega Man arcade game, Mega Man the Power Battle. You could go in the X-Men arcade machine. It would still run. You could still find these old amazing machines, and they took care of them. And they remember when they used to, you could get tokens and you put the tokens in the machines to play them, and you didn't have to spend exactly your money. I mean, you were, but the tokens and stuff, they don't do that anymore. I miss that. It was cool. It was neat. It was interesting. I always wondered how they were able to manipulate the machines to do that, and because it's token money. It's not real money, but it was just a special time where I remember going to Dave & Buster's back in the 2000s, and it was so different. It wasn't a place that was obsessed with sports, and there was 10,000 TV screens with the same sports fucking game playing. They would have like hundreds of arcade machines, and they were all old. They were like old fucking machines and shit, and it was great. Now when you go to Dave & Buster's, all the machines are from the 2010s. All of them. And a lot of them are really cool. Like, there's a new Star Wars one I saw where you can blow up the Death Star. And there's cool ones, like from the 2010s, but they're really not special, and they're not like the old ones. They're not great. They're not the amazing, classic, awesome, golden age arcade machines. They're really not. I mean, if you go to a bowling alley nowadays, you'll see arcade machines, but all of them will be from the 2010s. And when you go to a movie theater, sometimes in the movie theater, there'll be a little room, and there'll be like a few arcade machines in there, but all of them are from the 2010s, and they're always these shitty machines like the claw machines that are a rip-off, or when you throw the fucking basketballs, or a driving game from the 2010s. It's always something generic and shitty. It's never a 2000s arcade machine. It's never a 90s arcade machine. These companies were like, oh, we gotta put stuff in there, just put in the new machines. Yeah, it's good. It's like that. Those are sections at the movie theaters where you see the arcades. They just want them just to be for little kids. Just for the little kiddies. What about everyone else? What about the adults? Why are these sections, especially at the movies, they're always geared towards the little kiddies? Why? I mean, these people are like, well, they don't know anything about arcades or video game history. They're just like, oh, well, young kids like arcade machines, so that's what we're going to do, so just put that in there, right? They don't even think about adults going there to play them. And what about the younger generations who never got to play these 90s arcade machines and these games? Never got to fucking experience that shit because they weren't around in the 2000s and stuff, and they weren't old enough in the 2000s, the golden age, to experience them. So you're basically just like, fuck all these young kids. They don't get to experience any of that. It pisses me off. But what are you going to do? This is what happens when you grew up in a different era. Times change, and you just got to be thankful. And I'm very thankful. I'm very lucky. I'm very happy. And I'm proud of myself for cherishing these memories that most people in society take for granted. A lot of my friends and people I grew up with, they would be with me at these arcade places in the 2000s. They didn't appreciate it like me. Some of them did, but most people, they take the stuff that's now you can't experience anymore. They took all that shit for fucking granted. I never did that. Anything that I loved in my life, I always cherished it for my whole life. I didn't care about how much older I was getting or whatever the fuck, or the sea of change in society. I keep things old school. I keep them the way I loved it, and it meant so much more to me than other people. And I think that's what it means to be a retro gamer. And most people in society aren't that. And it's okay, but it's just sad. It's honestly, all these other fucking people, they're all missing out. They're missing out on this feeling, and it isn't just nostalgia. It's like this wonderment feeling. It's just, it was a thrill thing. It was so exciting to go to a random hockey rink and to see a room, like this big room with like 30 to 40 arcade machines, and they're all like smashed together, and they're all like Soul Calibur and Tekken. Remember Tekken 3? Everyone played that, and they were all there, and that's where I got to see X-Men versus Street Fighter and all those games, the Darkstalkers games, Power Stone, Hydro Thunder, like I said, all these machines. What about Arctic Thunder? Remember that from the 2000s? How amazing that was. Now you can hardly ever find that Arctic Thunder arcade machine. I played that 1,000 times. And there'd always be like a little place that's near the arcade where you can buy like super pretzels there or French fries. And I'd buy that shit all the time. All the time. And then I'd go back to the machine and I'd eat my fries while I played Street Fighter 2. Championship Edition. And the Arctic Thunder. That arcade machine, the fucking snow, the wind would blow in your face. The cool wind from the vents on the machine to make it seem like you were really out there driving in the snow, and your seat would shake, and it was just amazing. And like all these arcade machines, these games, the 90s ones, like most people don't talk about them anymore. Like it's just like this memory that people forgot about, or just like they totally neglected in their mind. But I remember when you were all there with me and you loved it and you would think about them. Metal Slug 2, all the Neo Geo machines. Man, those were the fucking days. Let me tell you. Arctic Thunder. It's just, it was special. That's why, if you're watching this video and you were too young to experience this in the 2000s because of whatever, go look up an arcade place to go to. Sometimes you'll see them at the mall or these special little places. Go there just to try it out. Maybe you can feel what people my age felt. Maybe you can experience this and you can get the sense of some of that magic that people my age got to grow up with, because it's like an extinct thing now. Now it's like Blockbuster, like it's mostly gone. It's no longer the Wild West anymore for the arcades, and everything changed in the 2010s. Everything got fucked in the 2010s. The 2010s ruined everything. Fashion, architecture, TV, movies, video games, music. The 2010s just destroyed everything I loved about pop culture. And that's why I will always forever cherish the 2000s. It's an underrated decade. Most people talk about the 80s and the 90s, and maybe the 70s. But the 2000s, it's still underrated. Like, people don't appreciate the 2000s enough. And every time people talk about the fucking 2000s, they always talk about shitty things that were in the 2000s, like songs or movies. They don't talk about the great stuff, the amazing stuff. And that was one of the amazing things that people don't think about. It was that Wild West, traveling. You go anywhere and you'd see an arcade machine. Even back in the day, I heard when you used to go to funeral homes, sometimes they would have a Miss Pac-Man arcade machine there. Yes, at a fucking funeral home. Do you know how badass that is? And how special that is? Like, if you're mourning over the loss of your loved one, your family member, your friend, you can play Miss Pac-Man there. Just for 1 or 2 rounds. It'll make you feel a little better. And it was like these machines felt like they were an extension of your family, because you grew up with these arcade machines, and through time you'd always see them. When you go back to places and they'd still be there. Oh, that machine, that Pac-Man machine is still there. That Mortal Kombat machine, the Cruisin' Exotica machine, they're still there. And then eventually, they were all gone. Fucking all of them. Wiped out. Neglected by most people, but the cool people like me still cherish them and still remember them. So anyway, this is my little tribute video to arcade machines in the 2000s and my childhood. Let me know if you guys experienced this, or let me know what you guys think. Please like and subscribe. My name is SuperPet98. Thank you for watching.